Welcome back, everyone. The next topic that we will move on to now is media and cannabis. As the industry evolves, there are opportunities to get involved with media from many different outlets. Today, I would like to present to you James Zachodni, founder of Dope Magazine and CEO and founder of Fairchild. James began publishing Dope Magazine in 2011. This publication focuses on the medical and the recreational cannabis industry. Dope is one of the largest cannabis publications that is currently in 30 states in the US and Canada and prints 100,000 copies monthly. James also produced groundbreaking industry events like the Dope Cup and Dope Industry Awards in multiple markets across the country. Dope magazine was acquired by High Times for 11.2 million US dollars in October of 2018. In 2019, James and his Dope magazine co-founder, David Tran, started the event production platform Fairchild Events to better service the emerging cannabis industry. Your screen will now go blank for a few minutes while we get James Zachodni up on the screen. Please do not refresh or close any tabs. During the presentation, you can ask questions to James through the chat box, and he will answer them after his presentation. Again, during the break before James comes on, you do not need to refresh your screen or close any tabs. We'll be back to you shortly in a few minutes with James Zachodni.
Hi, thanks for having me, MIBCC. This is a great honor to be the chosen candidate to speak about media and cannabis. My name is James Zachodni. My background is pretty far and wide in the media space, so we're going to get into a little bit of that, and I hope all of you gain some knowledge about media and cannabis from this presentation. There's a lot of things to talk about. I'm going to kind of keep it focused on the things that I feel like I'm very well versed in. The first is going to be, as we get into the table of contents here, we will do the origin story of who I am and what my background is and why I was chosen to speak to you about media. And the background is going to entail a little bit of my history. Some has to do with cannabis and some doesn't. But I do think it'll give you a better understanding of who I am, where I came from, and how I got into this industry. Shortly after that, we're going to jump into the beginning of Dope Magazine. So that is the kind of the bread and butter of what I've done as far as cannabis media goes. The Dope Magazine story is pretty interesting, and I think you guys will get a lot of cool insight from it and hopefully be able to see where I've been and what I've done over the years with Dope and sort of the transition that's happened in the past 12 months or so and where I'm at now. The next topic we're going to talk about is transitioning from medical to recreational. So I know many of you are in Latin America and this is a big topic right now in your world. So the transition that I went through was pretty interesting because we were the first state, along with Colorado. I'm in Washington state. So we were the first state in the US to legalize cannabis. So it was a very exciting time and a very, very controversial time. So I'm gonna give you a little background on what happened and a little bit of insight to do's and don'ts during this really pivotal time in a lot of country and states cannabis history. After that, I'm going to talk a little bit about traditional media versus new media. Traditional media we'll talk about, and these are the media platforms that you may know, print media, television, radio, and then of course new media, which encompasses a lot of digital media, which is social media, websites, blogs, anything that you pretty much find online. After that, media regulations. So this is a very hot topic around how and in what ways you can market yourself through different media outlets as a cannabis company or brand. There's a lot to cover there, so I'm going to keep it pretty high level. I don't think there is anything that you can't find by digging around online. And the real tricky part is depending on where you're at in the world, that is going to be a decisive factor on what kind of regulations you'll be facing. So there's a lot to cover, so we'll get into that. Next is a topic that I'm really excited about, which is creating a brand. Now, the reason why I added this to my speech is because a lot of media companies don't look at themselves as a brand. They look at themselves as a educational outlet or a news outlet, which is important. But if you truly want to find success within the media landscape, and especially within the cannabis media landscape, I highly recommend creating a brand within your media company. We'll dig into that more. I have a lot of great examples and some insight to that world. And then the final topic that, again, is also very dear to me because it encompasses things that I've been fairly successful at, is expanding your media company into other verticals. Now, this is something a lot of media companies don't talk about, but the overall verticals that can come from media companies, everything from events to merchandise, to all kinds of different products and things that your readership or your fans or followers might be interested in. So that's a very exciting thing for a lot of media companies because that definitely is a important part to their company and especially to their bottom line revenues. So anyways, those are the topics that we're going to cover today. And again, my name is James Zachodni, and I was the co-founder of Dope Magazine. And I am currently the CEO and co-founder of a new company called Fairchild. So we'll dig into a little bit of that in a few. And for now, though, let's jump into our first topic. So my origin story. So most of you will probably recognize who that lady is that you're looking at. It is, of course, Kim Kardashian. So this magazine was called D-List Magazine, and it was a magazine that I started back in 2007. Now, that was quite a while ago in the grand scheme of things. We're talking 12 years ago. This was before Instagram. This was, right when Facebook launched. A lot of things have changed, obviously, since then. The biggest change is in the media landscape is, of course, the digital world, which was something that we definitely needed to expand into after I started this first magazine. So I'll tell you a little bit about this magazine just so you kind of have an understanding of what this was all about. So D-List stood for the words dress, dine, drink, and dance. And that was sort of our big four topics that we covered in our magazine. The main thing was mostly about bar, restaurant, nightlife, and fashion. These things were, kind of hot topics within the city I lived in because a lot of young people, especially my age when I started this, I was in my 20s, were very interested in, where to go out to eat, where to shop, where to go out dancing. So we decided to create a magazine, and I literally had no background in media publishing. I was actually a bartender, and my bartending kind of led me to start this magazine. When we would be out in different cities, we would always wonder where to go out and where to go eat and where to go dance. And other cities that we went to had publications very similar to D-List, which brought great joy to us when we were out because we were able to figure it out no matter where we were. So when I came back to Seattle after a couple trips, I asked myself, well, why doesn't my city have this magazine that people can turn to? So we decided to just start a magazine. My partners and I got together and we decided we're gonna, give ourselves 6 months to create this magazine. We did, and it took off pretty fast. We basically taught ourselves how to design it. I took a couple crash courses in the Adobe suite, learning how to use InDesign and Illustrator and all the different tools I needed to use. We hired a couple local photographers, a couple local writers. Of course, we did a lot of the writing ourselves in the beginning, and we really just kind of made it happen. And I think that's really, kind of the grassroots of, a lot of the things I did was I found a need in an industry and I filled it. And once we get into a little bit more about the Dope Magazine story, you'll kind of see how all that came together. But D-List was a very successful magazine. We ran it from 2007 to 2013 when we sold it to a colleague of ours who wanted to take it over. And like you see here, we had everyone from Kim Kardashian to Neo to, famous chefs like Robert Irvine and, you name it. Anyone that was kind of relevant within pop culture during those years, we had them on the cover of the magazine. So it was kind of my crash course into media and to really understanding the ins and outs, especially of creating a print publication. So D-List was a great starting point for me, and it definitely led me to what now I consider my actual skill set in life, which is creating media. So the next step in my career after D-List was actually kind of simultaneously, because we started Dope Magazine in 2011 and I actually was running D-List until 2013. So it was a pretty lengthy tenure there for me to be doing both the magazines simultaneously. Took a lot out of me, but I definitely think it was great to start Dope when we did. The beginning of Dope Magazine really came because of my partner, David Tran, who was my partner at Dope Magazine and who's also my partner now at Fairchild. David Tran got into the cannabis dispensary business by starting a medical dispensary here in Seattle. He was new to the medical cannabis industries, and he joined up with a couple partners that knew a lot about the local cannabis community and the industry that was still medical and still very small at the time. And this was probably, I would say, in early, actually I would say late 2010. At this time, Dave, he owned different bars and nightclubs, and which is how we knew each other, because we used to throw parties for D-List Magazine in his bars and nightclubs. So when he invested into a cannabis dispensary, he found a little bit of frustration because he didn't know where to advertise his new dispensary, because a lot of the publications and the usual places you go to market yourself, like newspapers, local magazines. Again, at this time there was just a handful of social media platforms, but really nobody wanted to take cannabis on because it was still medical and it was still very unknown as far as the legalities around having cannabis related advertising on your platform. So he came to me with the idea of, why don't we start a magazine that we can actually advertise in, because really there isn't much options right now. So I said, you know what? I know how to make magazines. I think we can probably pull this together. So I took the same team that we had at D-List Magazine, and we came up with the idea of Dope Magazine. So just kind of some history here. Dope, the word DOPE was actually an acronym originally for Defending Our Patients Everywhere. We were very medically focused when we first came out. We were very about the whole medical industry, the medical community, telling stories from the front lines of different societal issues within cannabis, all the way to criminal justice issues. You name it, we covered it. It was a pretty hard-hitting magazine in the beginning. Really didn't spend too much time talking about a lot of the more recreational topics that you see nowadays, like artists and music and that kind of stuff. It was really focused on the medical power of the plant and sort of what it did for people and kind of the injustices that were going on around that world. So the very first issue we came out with, we actually somehow were able to get the mayor of Seattle on the very first cover, as you see here. his name is Mike McGinn. He was actually a big advocate for cannabis. He spoke at a big festival called Seattle Hemp Fest, which was, I think, might still be the single biggest cannabis festival in the United States every year. In its heyday, it was drawing about 300,000 people to this 3-day festival here in Seattle. So it was a big movement going on during this time. And when we decided to start the magazine in late 2010, we told ourselves we have to have the very first issue ready to go for Seattle Hemp Fest in 2011, which is in August. So we had a very short window of time to get together all of the necessary things to launch a magazine. So it was a very high pressure, but we saw that this was something that could be big. So when we actually finally did launch Dope Magazine at HempFest, it took off instantly. It was a hit right away. You couldn't imagine the looks we got when we were standing on the sidewalk of the event with tens of thousands of magazines next to us, screaming out "free dope" to anyone that would walk by, and we would put one in their hands, whether they wanted it or not. We would just give it out, and so it was a real guerrilla kind of grassroots launch to Dope Magazine at Seattle Hemp Fest, and we were very, very proud of that very first issue. And it was definitely a monumental time in my career launching Dope Magazine. So one thing that you got to think about as well, which we encountered, was transitioning from medical to recreational. So in Seattle, as you may or may not know, the law passed during the 2012 election. That was the time when basically a new law called Initiative 502 went on the ballot and was voted on. But leading up to the November vote, and especially at HempFest, the second year that dope was around in 2012, there was a massive I would say coming to a heads from both the yes on Initiative 502 and the no on Initiative 502 sides of the battle. There was definitely a lot of pros and cons to the legalization. I don't think it was hard to really pick sides, because both sides had very valid points of why legalization was either bad or good. And it wasn't just about it being legalized, but it was about all of the rules and regulations that came along with the bill. So to this day, still, a lot of the regulations that were written into the original bill are still somewhat frowned upon, as far as being well thought out, kind of well understood regulations. I think a lot of it was kind of slammed through because we were the first state and we didn't have all these other states to look at and to sort of educate ourselves on what they did well and what they did bad, and then kind of write our bills around that. We literally were just guessing, so there definitely was a lot of people on both sides that were very fired up. And I still remember at HempFest that year, people walking around with signs and billboards and yelling at each other, almost getting into fights from both the yes and the no side. And it was pretty intense. And as the biggest media company in the middle of this storm of controversy going on, we stood right there in the middle. So we had a meeting and we had to ask ourselves, what side are we going to be on, and are we going to endorse the yes to the 502 or the no to the 502? Now, being in media, it's always hard because once you make a stand on something, that can reflect on a lot of different outcomes. Specifically for us was advertisers, and they're kind of they can be swayed very easily if they don't agree with your policies. So for instance, if the advertiser was very pro legalization and we came out as against legalization, they would probably just stop advertising with us. So there was definitely implications there. So I think what we did, which I think was a little bit of a neutral stance, was we picked the leading voices from each side of the conversation, and we invited them to come and have a Q&A session with us that we would publish in our magazine. So we basically took the magazine, split it in half, and gave the yes to the 502 a platform to speak their mind, and then the no to the 502 a platform to speak their mind. And I think that was a great sort of neutral way for us to sort of show both sides of the argument, but then also stay neutral as a media company, because we knew either way there was good things that came from both sides. So we didn't feel like we were siding with the evil, dictators on one side. We definitely read everything that they were saying, and we couldn't come to a decision which who was right or who was wrong. But at the end of the day, as you know, history tells us that legalization did pass in Washington state. So the yes to I-502 ended up winning the battle. And in 2012, Washington was tied for the first state in the U.S. to legalize cannabis. So pretty awesome benchmark for us here in Washington state. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about different types of media, because this talk is supposed to be about media, and hopefully some of you are interested in getting into the media space, and maybe you just want to learn more about it because you're a marketer or you're a brand or company that is looking to do some marketing through different media platforms. So it's going to quick overview here of traditional media versus new media. So traditional media, and this is media that's been around for decades, and definitely something that is still used today, but definitely is starting to give way a little bit to new media. Traditional media includes magazines, so obviously Dope Magazine and D-List Magazine were both part of the traditional media landscapes. Newspapers, obviously, are another very, very old traditional media platform. There's also direct mail, which, if you get mail every day, people are still using direct mail to market. Things like billboards have been around for a long time. Radio, obviously, probably one of the older forms. And then television. So those are your main traditional media platforms. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one and sort of the pros and cons here in a second. New media, of course, is everything that kind of started once the digital age was upon us. And these are different ways to also market yourself, but through digital platforms. So obviously websites, blogs, e-zines, which are just electronic magazines type of things, newsletters, those go out quite frequently. You probably get or subscribe to quite a few of those. Of course, the big one, social media, which we'll dig into quite a bit. OTT, which is over the top, which is basically a type of video or television platform that doesn't use traditional cable television or different. It's basically off the standard federally regulated television programming. So YouTube, different platforms like that, which you're probably familiar with a few of them. Netflix and stuff are OTT platforms. So the reason why it's important to kind of know the difference is because as a media company in the world in 2019, you got to be able to sort of play in both traditional media and in new media. Now, magazines, I've obviously started 2 different magazines, and I find them to be very an attractive media platform. But there is a lot to be said about traditional media that can't kind of hold ground with new media, which the number one thing is trackability. Magazines, newspapers, direct mail, billboards, radio, television, they're great. They have their place in the grand scheme of media. I think all of us still probably watch TV in some form or fashion. Definitely, I'm sure we've all picked up a magazine in the last month or two. We all get mail most likely. Newspapers are a little bit of a dying breed, but they're still relevant. But new media is the most important part of the media landscape as it is today, and the reason why is because there is actual trackability of the marketing that is done through these platforms. So people, when we talk to advertisers about, a magazine ad, and they ask us, well, how many people are going to read this magazine every month? The best thing that we can do is give them a guess. We print X number of magazines. We estimate X number of readers per magazine. So that could be, if you have a magazine at your house and it's sitting on the coffee table, there might be 2 or 3 people over the course of the month that might pick up the magazine and read it because it's sitting out, and you might read it, your wife might read it, your friend might come over, they might read it. So there is definitely a certain level of impressions that you can guess upon, but you cannot ever give a statistical correct answer to how many eyeballs are going to see an advertisement in a magazine, because really there is no way to track it. Same thing goes with newspapers, same thing goes with direct mail, same thing goes with billboards, and the same thing goes with radio and television. Again, radio can get a good general ballpark of how many people were tuned in during a specific time of day, but the problem is you don't know if the sound is up or the sound is down, or the person's not even in the room. So there's a lot of different things that are definitely traditional media have problems with, and like I said, that is primarily based on tracking impressions and actual true analytics for views and reads and listens in traditional. New media, websites, blog, e-zines, newsletters. The great part is, we have all these great analytical tools built into anything that's digital nowadays. You can pretty much down to the second know exactly how many people have clicked through a banner ad, or have opened up a email, or have obviously seen your social media page or your ad that you ran on social media. And same thing goes with YouTube. You can see how many people that watched a video or whatnot. So advertisers tend to really like new media because they do get direct numbers, and they can see a true, accurate calculations of how many people have seen that ad, which then gives them correct, customer acquisition costs and other metrics that are very important to marketers to understand how their dollars are being spent and seeing trackable results. So with that, what I find to be very important is a blend of both traditional media and new media when you're developing a media company. If you're going to start a magazine, do not forget to create a great website, and to have great newsletters, and to have a very strong social media presence. Dope Magazine had over 500,000 social media followers, still does, and we had YouTube subscribers, and we had newsletter subscribers. So we had not just the magazine, but a robust new media as well to couple with the magazine. What we told people is we like to use your advertising in 360 degrees, which means you can get advertising from us, whether it's in the magazine, through a video that we put out on our YouTube page, through our banner ad you might run on our website, or through a social media post that we would run for you. There's really no limit, and I think that's what marketers are looking for today. They're looking for lots of options, not just a magazine or a newsletter. They want to kind of be able to put their money into a lot of different verticals, which is great for you because you can monetize each one of those individually. And if you have a very robust advertiser, they might just buy every single option that you have. So again, using traditional media is great. Using new media is really great. Only thing I would say to close this section out is traditional media, the only important thing to remember is the price that you pay needs to match what you're actually getting. So there's a lot of overpriced traditional media, especially when it comes to billboards or television, that if it's too expensive, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. If the price is correct, there's nothing wrong with doing traditional media at all. So keep that in mind when you're either developing your business or doing some marketing for your business. That always, understand that the price needs to match what the actual outcome is going to be for the marketing. Media regulations. I'm sure everyone has heard of some of these issues out there, but there's definitely a lot of red tape when it comes to where you can actually market yourself outside of the niche sort of magazines and newsletters and whatnot. Going with the big marketing giants, Facebook, Google, these guys have set up very strict rules because cannabis in the United States is still federally illegal. So these platforms have a lot of skin in the game when it comes to the federal government, and so they've just made a hard no on any kind of cannabis marketing, which is kind of insane when you think about how much money goes into advertising every year. Out of the whole gamut of different places you can advertise, and includes traditional and new media, being a cannabis advertiser, you can only access 49% of any digital marketing that's available out there because of regulations. And that is, not to say that things won't change once, laws and regulations get adapted, and, these regulations loosen up. But for the time being, you have to be really savvy when it comes to using the big platforms, and understanding that you can't just throw out an advertisement on Facebook and think that they're going to accept it. They're going to decline it and could possibly shut down your page. Dope Magazine actually had our Instagram and Facebook shut down a couple of times, even though we were just telling journalistic stories and editorial pieces. This was early on, when things were first starting to happen, and they didn't know how to handle it. So again, if you have a marketing person in your company, or you're looking to start a digital marketing or media company, definitely spend a lot of time digging into media regulations and understanding that what you can and what you can't do. There's a lot of ways to work around it. Instagram is still very somewhat loose on their regulations, so it's a little bit easier. But again, they're owned by Facebook, so there's still a little bit of the problems. You've heard stories of Instagram cannabis influencers getting their 100,000 follower accounts shut down, and it can be detrimental to a lot of companies if your main platform is doing marketing and media through a social media platform. So just be very careful, understand the laws, and make sure that your marketing person is very savvy about what you can and can't do. So creating a brand, this is definitely I would say the most important thing to me when it comes to a successful media company. Creating a brand is what separates a business from a lifestyle. So look at a company like Reebok versus a company like Nike. Reebok is a company, Nike is a brand. What that means is adding the extra elements that really kind of create a community and an organic following of what your media company is all about. So Dope Magazine, we had it really good because a lot of the times, the name Dope itself was very attractive to people. It meant cool, it meant awesome, or however you want to describe it. But then also had a very grassroots sort of compassionate medical side to it in the beginning. So as the company started to grow, we really wanted to embrace dope as a brand and as a lifestyle brand within cannabis. So by being a dope reader, or wearing a dope hat, or you're basically saying, hey, I am part of this movement of cannabis. I'm a proud user, and I'm about defending our plant and our patients everywhere, and that means a lot to people. There's other brands, other media outlets out there that they created a great publication or a great website, what have you, but they didn't create the brand. And the brand is really what's going to kind of separate you from the pack. I mean, anyone can go out there and throw a website up and write a couple articles, right? But there's only a few media brands that people really resonate with. Think about medias like Playboy. Think about record labels like Virgin. These are true brands that represent more than just the product that they're putting out. It's a summation of all of the things that are within their ecosystem and bringing a community together behind it. And I think that's the real magic of creating a brand within the cannabis industry. And the great part is we're in a time right now where people are hungry and they're excited to show their support and love for cannabis. And the more it grows and the bigger it gets, the more people are jumping on board and saying, yes, I'm a cannabis user. So embrace this moment in time right now where you can create a media company and just be honest and have integrity of what you're saying and what you're doing out there as a media company, and follow through on your promises, and put out the magazine or what have you on time every month, and really just support your readers, and respond to messages, and all those things really accumulate into a really great brand. And I'm proud to say that Dope became one of the best known cannabis brands in the industry over the 8 years that we ran it, and I couldn't have asked for a better brand. And during that time, I was the chief brand officer of Dope magazine, so it feels even better since I get to take a little bit of credit for creating such a awesome brand. So definitely focus on that when you are starting your media company. So taking your brand and expanding it into other verticals. So this is probably the key reason why it's important to create a brand, because again, it's not just to have advertisers place ads in your magazine or place ads on your newsletters. It's really to be able to expand outside of the actual your core media functions, and to be able to monetize other verticals basically. So my background from doing D-List magazine and previously before that was producing events. So I got really excited when I got the idea to start throwing large-scale cannabis events around Dope magazine. So since we already had such an amazing brand, we didn't have any issues with transitioning our brand into, I call it the real world experience of taking the magazine and then making it come to life, which was what we did through Dope events. We threw, Dope Cups, which was a giant cannabis cup competition and festival, which drew 3,000 to 5,000 people. We threw that in 5 different states around the U.S. Great success every year. We did it for 7 years in a row here in Washington State, 5 years in a row in Oregon State, and in other states around the country. The Dope Cup just kind of became an extension of the magazine, but it was a huge revenue stream for us, and it ended up making up about 30% of our overall revenue was through our events. We also did a Dope Industry Awards, where we wanted to honor and award different people within the industry. So that was more focused on the businesses and the people, and not so much on the products. So we would have the advocate of the year, we would have the best staff at a dispensary, different sort of awards that we would give out, and it would bring the whole community together and kind of show them that Dope cared about them as a media outlet, and we wanted to shine a light on the people within the industry. So huge success. Again, we ran this event in multiple markets across the U.S. and people were always very excited to receive an award from Dope magazine, because we had built up such a great brand and a great media outlet that it was a true honor for people to get awarded. And then we also did events like the Bud Tender Appreciation Day events, which we called the BAD, B-A-D party. And that was something that we did because we wanted to give back to the bud tenders and the people on the front lines of the industry that, were the ones really out there educating the consumers and giving them the information that they needed to make, buying decisions when they're at the stores. So the bud tenders have become sort of the rock stars of the cannabis industry, and it was definitely our way of sort of showing them love and appreciation. So we throw this great free event for them to come out. We would feed them and wine them and dine them and send them off with amazing gift bags, and a lot of sponsors would come out because they all wanted to interact with the bud tenders, so they would hopefully build some brand loyalty with the different sponsors. So it was a really exciting, fun event for the bud tenders, and we were really excited to produce those in multiple states as well. And so outside of the events, like I briefly mentioned before, was, think about merchandise. The Dope magazine hat became sort of an iconic hat within the industry that, I still walk around today and see people wearing Dope hats. And it makes me smile because it's not just, you're not just showing support for a media company, but you're also, it's kind of a flag that you fly saying that, hey, I'm a cannabis advocate or I'm a cannabis supporter. And the word Dope is also kind of fun to have on a hat because, people think you're cool. I've had people try to buy my hat off of my head as I walk down the street before. So again, expanding into other verticals. We also even dipped into our own product line at one point. We did, oils, and we did joints and other things, all under the Dope Magazine sort of umbrella. So there's a lot of ways you can go, but don't think that your only revenue stream is based on your actual media platform. There's a lot of things you can do if you create an amazing brand. That is all the time I got, and I'm very honored to be able to speak with you guys about media and sort of my history with Dope Magazine. Like I said, we actually ended up selling Dope Magazine to the only true legacy brand in cannabis, which was High Times, last year around this time. And it was a very exciting time for us because we knew that there was gonna be longevity and legacy with High Times that we may not have been able to fulfill. So selling it is definitely, there's a little bit of a heartache there, but there's definitely a lot of joy. And we are now on to our next adventure. My partner David and I have started a new business called Fairchild, which is an event and marketing platform. So we took a lot of what we learned from Dope Magazine, and now we're sort of reimagining it in a new way to be able to continue the legacy that we started with events and media, and bringing it all together and bringing people together within this industry, and continuing to push forward this amazing plant that we all love and support. So I look forward to seeing you all out there in the world, and definitely feel free to ask any questions, and I'm open to anything and everything you want to ask. Thanks. Hey guys, I'm going to answer some of the questions that were sent in from my speech earlier, and hopefully I'll answer them as best I can. And here we go. So the first question is, if I want to commit my time to only 2 social media platforms, which ones would you recommend? Well, this one is a little bit dependent on what business you do specifically, whether you're doing something that's more B2B or if it's B2C, business to business or business to consumer. But I'm just going to assume that maybe there's a little bit of both that we can kind of touch on. So for me personally, I really think that Instagram is a great platform. There isn't as many regulations as there is on Facebook right now, even though it's owned by Facebook. They definitely are a little bit looser on certain aspects, but they do still regulate it, so you do have to still be careful with what you say on there. It's great for creating content, obviously anything that's visual. So if you have a product, like a consumer facing product, it's great to show off your product. Even having the ability to do stories with swipe ups where you can direct people directly back to your website through it, and then of course running ads on it is very effective, and the metrics are still pretty good in a sense of the cost to run ads on the platform is still fairly reasonable. The other platform I would say is super important that a lot of people look over is LinkedIn. I think this is a great platform to use. It's obviously focused from business to business. However, consumer-facing brands do have a lot of success on there, being able to sort of position themselves within the industry that they're in to kind of show themselves off more. Also, using it as your own personal platform to then link yourself to your business on LinkedIn really gives people a full idea of who you are, what you do, and then what your company does as well, all on one platform. So, say Instagram and LinkedIn are probably my 2 favorite choices. Next question is, if I have a media brand and I want to create a product from that, from your experience, does it affect your relationship with your advertisers? Does it create a different dynamic with them because you now own a competing brand? Amazing question, because we definitely ran into this a little bit with Dope Magazine. We created a product line called Dope Premium Brands, and we were selling joints, we were selling concentrates, and we had a vaporizer as well as part of our product line. So yes, we did run into a few issues early on. I think the best way to do it is to understand who your advertisers are, and then also just understand that if they
are upset that, say, hey, look, we are promoting ourselves no more or no less than any of our advertisers are as well. So the only thing you don't want to run into is you constantly writing, editorial pieces about your products or making it look like there's favoritism in your advertising for your products within your own media platforms. So I would just say, just be cognizant of the fact that it doesn't look like you're kind of giving yourself all the accolades with your own products. Make sure that you still spread out the love to your advertisers as well, especially when you're doing product features and more editorial-based content. You definitely want to shy away from writing editorial about your own products. So that's my 2 cents. Next question. What is the best way to advertise yourself outside of social media, since that is hard to work with right now? Well, it depends on sort of what market you're in and what your options are. In the state I'm in Washington State in the U.S., there's definitely regulations around what you can and can't do. So there's still problems with obviously television and radio because those are federally regulated here in the U.S. So nothing cannabis related could go on those. However, like I said, OTT platforms like YouTube, also OTT radio, that kind of is like internet radio, don't have the same regulations. So you can go on podcasts. You can do, like I said, YouTube shows, YouTube channels are really great because you can get a lot of exposure through those, and there's a lot of shareability like social media, but without the regulations as well. So I would say start with those in a digital format. Look to either start your own podcast or join podcasts that have a good following to promote your brand, or just purchase advertising on those platforms as well. The other thing to look into is traditional media as well isn't bad as long as it's priced well. So, are there any local cannabis publications like magazines? Do your local newspapers allow you to advertise in them? Anything that has a good following that that gets a lot of visibility is a good option. But again, make sure that the price matches the the return on what you would get for whatever service it is that you choose to go with. All right, next question. What does Fairchild do? Fairchild is my new event platform, which we just launched, myself and my partner, David Tran. Basically, it's a 2 parts. We have a event production company that we actually produce events. We do our own events that we, will do it from the ground up. So, we did one on 420 called It's Lit, but it was produced by Fairchild and executed by Fairchild. But there's also, we do events for other companies too. So if a big company came to us and wanted us to produce their event for them, we would do that for them as well. So they would just give us a budget and we would produce the event that they wanted. The other side of the business is our technology platform. So Fairchild is going to be a web-based app that's going to allow people to buy tickets for events on our platform. There's also going to be a venue listing that will show different venues that are friendly towards cannabis events. So that way event producers know where they can go to throw their parties and events. And there's also going to be a very robust marketing engine in it as well, so we can direct people to events that they might be interested in when they're searching for cannabis events in their area. So those are kind of the main components of Fairchild. So it really is just an overall event platform, and we're going to be doing a big kind of rollout party during the Marijuana Business Conference, MJ BizCon, in December. So if you're going to be in Las Vegas in December for MJ Biz, make sure you keep your eye out for the Fairchild party, because that's where we're going to be kind of introducing ourselves to the cannabis industry. All right, look, I got a couple more. What is the best thing to pay attention to if I'm looking into being acquired or merging with another brand? Do you have any advice? Well, the only thing you can really do is do your due diligence. And that's really going to just consist of, opening up the financials, really understanding, what kind of a company they are. Are they healthy? Do they have a bunch of debt? And then also just kind of understanding the company from a consumer's point of view. Do they have a good reputation with, with the community and with other brands and within the industry? Because, cannabis is a very small industry still, and there's a lot of people that have done some bad things that may not resonate well with other brands, and if you become partners with them or get acquired by them or merge with them, you might be setting yourself up to be part of that same problem of people not wanting to work with them. So make sure and do your due diligence. It's important. A lot of lawyers can do that too if you don't feel like it's something that you want to do. Usually a good lawyer that specializes in mergers and acquisitions will have a process to do due diligence on that company. So again, just find out about their reputation, do your due diligence, make sure that they're saying what they say is true, especially financially. And other than that, that's pretty much all you can do, other than making sure that you like the people that you're going to be joining with. All right, last question. How do I get my content to reach more people? Is there really censorship in the app? So I'm assuming they're talking about Instagram. Instagram is just one of those things where they've created it in a way to really keep it as organic as possible. There are obviously ways to buy traffic and to kind of cheat the system a little bit. But overall, the whole point of Instagram is to try to keep it as a fair for everybody as possible. So the best way that we've seen to get more traffic is to really just be engaging with your Instagram, really reach out on other people's pages and comment and interact. Don't just sit back and expect people to come to your page. Also go the other direction and go to other people's pages and leave comments, and make sure too when people comment or leave any kind of note on your page that you respond. A lot of people get 100 comments on a post and they don't even write back on those comments. So those are things that we think are very important. Engagement is the number one thing. A lot of times companies will have millions of followers, but then you'll notice that their engagement is really bad, which means that probably a lot of those followers aren't true followers. They're either paid for or they're bots. So we definitely recommend doing outbound engagement along with the inbound engagement that happens when people comment on your posts. So that's pretty much, there isn't a secret formula. There isn't anything that you can do other than just be a good engaging page. All right guys, that's all I got. Talk to you guys soon.